In this video, we're going to start taking a deeper dive into the process of selling your innovation through a vehicle, typically referred to as a pitch deck. But you're not limited to a pitch deck. It just forms the basis of an efficient way to gather your thoughts together and to build to use other communication tools. And we'll discuss a little bit how to communicate effectively using visual aids yourselves, some props, etc. But let's first cover on the surface what type of communication tools might be available to you. These might be an elevator pitch, a pitch deck, an executive summary, a business plan, and a statement and defense of your key assumptions. So 5 categories: elevator pitch, pitch deck, executive summary, business plan, statement and defense of your key assumptions. Let's take a look at each one of these. What's an elevator pitch? Well, as the term implies, you're supposed to be able to make your pitch on a typical elevator ride, typically taking 1 minute perhaps. And what's the purpose of the elevator pitch deck? Well, the purpose is to get a second date. So treat the elevator pitch as a first date, and you want people to get interested enough that they'll want to have a second date with you to hear more. So the purpose of the elevator pitch is to answer quickly the question of so what? What's the fundamentally essence of what it is that you're proposing. The next is pitch deck. So this assumes that you got to the second date and now you have about 10 to 15 minutes to present a more detailed version of your innovation story. And you have 2 ways to go. One of them is to answer the questions why you, and why now, which we discussed in a previous video. Or you can take the route of explaining what's the problem, who is the customer, and how does the solution you're proposing alleviate the customer's problem. So either problem, customer, solution, or why you, why now. Contents of a typical pitch deck, 10 to 15 minute pitch deck. Another category we talked about was the executive summary, which is typically no more than 2 pages, and it's well prescribed by organized angel investor groups in the country, have a particular format that they like to see with some prescribed questions that you provide answers to. This makes it easier for angel investors to compare the viability of one innovation versus the other. So we will be covering the contents of an executive summary also. The next is a full-blown business plan. This has been out of favor somewhat lately, and the reason for this is that the business plans are changing so rapidly based on discovery. We talked about reducing the uncertainty associated with your assumptions. Well, that's going on so rapidly that the business plan is useful only as a living document. So you need to use the business plan as particularly a tool to guide the founders themselves as to where are we at this point in time. So the last tool is a statement and defense of your key assumptions. To me, these are much more effective than financial projections, because we are not so interested in hearing the financial projections, because those financial projections are derived from your key assumptions, automatically derived from your key assumptions. So it's the defensibility of your key assumptions that is really critical to selling your innovation to funders in particular, including investors. And we talked about this in a previous video where your job is to reduce the uncertainty associated with each one of your assumptions through customer discovery, by talking to more and more customers, by talking to more and more vendors of the components that are going to go into your assumptions. So how do let's now focus, as I mentioned before, the basis of this, which is a 10 to 15 minute pitch deck, and let's talk about how to make an effective pitch deck. So on this slide, we show you a comparison of the components of a scientific presentation versus a biotech investor pitch deck. And you will note some of the differences. Two primary differences are highlighted on the slide. One of them is the story of the company and its financial status is of importance to the investors, of course. And things that may not be so emphasized in a scientific presentation are risks and risk mitigation. Plan is a key component of an investor pitch deck. Differentiation from competitors is also a component of an investor pitch deck. And the ask, what the ask means is how much money are you looking for and how are you going to use these funds and what deliverables are you promising based on what you know today as a result of the use of these funds. Now, we took a study from the Harvard Business School along with Professor Eisenman about startups going to investors to raise money to bring their innovations to practice. So this data was collected from 200 early stage innovative startup companies who were able to raise $360 million. And to give you a sense as to this landscape of raising money, in this particular data set, each company on the average had to contact 58 investors, ended up with 40 investor meetings, eventually raising an average of $1.3 million towards their innovation. It took approximately 13 weeks to raise that money. Their pitch decks were typically 20 pages long, and the amount of time that they were given to present their pitch deck was only 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So that will give you a sense as to what goes on in this field. On this slide, we show you a summary of the percent of decks, pitch decks, that included various topics. So for example, 96% of the pitch decks that were presented in this study contained a slide on product, 100% contained a slide on team, only 46% contained a slide on why now. So this will give you a rough sense as to what topics were considered important to present when fundraising for an innovation. And so when we combine these two and look at the results of the data, the typical configuration was as shown above: company purpose, problem solution, why now, market size, product team, business model, competition, and financials. And it's very similar, with just a few exceptions, to the recommended sequence of slides by the world's arguably most successful venture capital firm, Sequoia. So this is an order of a pitch deck that you may want to take into account. Now, this is an interesting slide. It shows you how many seconds were spent on each slide, from the one that most time was spent on to the one that least amount of time was spent on. And it really is truly amazing. In the second date situation, the discussion on the solution slide on the average was 10.6 seconds, 10 seconds toward the solution slide. So this means that on a second date even, you cannot go into too many details about what your solution is, but you need to deliver the benefits of that solution as rapidly as possible. And again, somewhat surprisingly, the discussion on financials took an average of 23 seconds, which is not much time, but it's 2 times or 2.5 times longer than what was spent on the solution. Why? Unfortunately, because if the innovation is not financially viable, then there is nothing else to talk about. So you need to be ready to defend the economic viability of your solution also.